All right, cool. So I'm Erin. I work at a consultancy called Shine Solutions, and today we're going to build some web components. For those who aren't familiar, web components are essentially a way of extending HTML in the browser. So it's all sort of browser native stuff. We're not going to be using any libraries. We're not going to be using any build system. I've just got a HTTP server, which is watching my code, which is going to serve up the stuff. But there's no build, there's nothing outside of just the browser. So this is the web component we're going to be building. Now that Google Plus isn't a thing anymore, obviously there's an opening in the social media market. So we're going to build a social media post. You can see there, it's got a picture of the avatar. We've got a little bit of content, the message that the person's going to send. And most importantly, we've got a way to react to the content. So we can give one of our standard reactions like happy, sad, or aerial tramway. And as you react to the post, you can see across the bottom there, we keep a track of all of the reactions that we've had. Cool, so we're going to build that. I've got a sort of start here. There's just a bit of CSS here that's set up all the colors and stuff. It's nothing too exciting. All right, so to start with, we want to put our component on the page, right? So we're just going to create a new HTML element called tweet post. Now we need to tell the browser about this, so we can do that using custom elements.define and the name of our element. The one rule with the element names is it must have a hyphen in it. That's how the browser knows it's a custom element. Then we need to describe the behavior of our custom element, and we do that by passing in a class, which extends HTML element, which gives us a whole bunch of nifty stuff. All right, inside our class, we need a constructor, and it needs to call super. And that's it. That's enough to get a custom element on the page. So we save that and flip back to our browser. Here you can see our tweet post, and Firefox here has recognized it's a custom element, and it'll link you to the code there. So it's all there ready to go, which is super nice. Now, the next thing we need to do is set up, obviously, the content of what's going to be in our custom element. And we're going to do that using something called Shadow DOM. And the Shadow DOM is basically a way of creating DOM inside of your element that's isolated from the rest of the page. You've probably seen it if you've ever used a select element or a video element in the browser, something that's a single element when you write it, but obviously has a lot of stuff going on inside. That's Shadow DOM. And the way that browsers implement native Shadow DOM is a complete pain because you can't target it. You can't touch any of the internals at all. But it does mean that all of the CSS inside that DOM is isolated. So you can let in CSS from the outside, but CSS from inside isn't going to get out and affect anything else on the page. So we can create some Shadow DOM just by doing this .attach shadow. And we need to pass it a mode. This can be open or closed. The way that browsers implement their own Shadow DOM stuff is essentially the same as closed, which has got that annoying behavior where you can't target it. You can't target the internals with JavaScript at all. When we're doing it, though, we can make it open, which means that any other developer using our web component can then get to the inside from outside using JavaScript, which is much nicer, I think. Cool. So now we've got our shadow root. And now we want to start attaching elements inside of that. And you can do that just the same way you would create any other HTML. So you can do it using document.createElement and appending stuff. But today, we're going to just use inner HTML and pass in a string. All right, so inside that string, we're going to create the HTML for our element. So we want a div. Can't type this early in the morning. We want a container for the post, and then we want our avatar. We want our content. We want the reaction button. And we want the list of reactions that have happened before. Right, and then we want this all to look nice. So what we're going to do is really quickly write some CSS by copying and pasting. CSS is already prepared. Cool. So now, if we look at this, we've got basically the outline of our element here. And you can see, here's our shadow root, and it's all in there inside the browser tools there. One thing to note is this blue that the border is defined inside our CSS here using a CSS variable called theme color. And this theme color variable is actually defined out here in our light DOM. So if you want CSS to pass through, you can define CSS variables in your light DOM, and then they will pass through into the shadow DOM. Also, if you explicitly inherit things, they'll pass through the shadow barrier. Okay, cool. So now we want to put some stuff in here. The first thing we want to add is that the avatar picture. And that's a nice simple string, right? We just need a URL of the image. So let's pass it in as an attribute. Images. So inside of our element now, we need to get access to that string. And that is super easy. So this is going to refer to this instance of the element. Dot attributes, and then we can just refer to the attribute by name, and we want to grab the value. So what is this? Avatar. All right, so that's enough. Like, it just works like any other HTML element. It's got that same API that you can call to get access to this stuff. And then to put that in our element, we can just create an image element with a source. And then because this is just a template string, we can just pass the value in. Super easy. And obviously, in the real life, we would put an alt tag on our image. And then we've got our avatar. Cool. So the next thing we want to add is the content of the post. Now, we probably don't want to pass that in as an attribute because it's going to be a bit longer. We might want to allow HTML and stuff inside of it. So instead, we want to actually pass that in the body of our element here. Once again, we don't want to type that, so let's just grab this one. And we can stick that in here. So once we do that, now we need to have a look in our custom element template. We need to say where we want this bit of content to go. And we can do that using a special element called slot. So we just say a slot, and a slot is basically kind of like a symlink between the shadow DOM and the light DOM. So if we have a look at it in the browser, we've got our content there. We can see this content is here in the light DOM. But inside the shadow root, if we have a look in the content here, you can see it's got like this link into the light DOM. So that's cool, but one of the things here is because this isn't a light DOM, the CSS that applies to it is light DOM CSS. Like our shadow DOM CSS doesn't get in there. So we kind of need a way to apply styles to light DOM things from inside the shadow DOM. So that we can, say, color this text that is blue there. We want that link text to be white, the same as the rest. So we can go in here, and there is a CSS pseudo element that we can use called slotted. And slotted takes an argument, which is a selector of the things that you want to select inside the slot, essentially. In our case, we want everything. So this is going to style everything that's inside the slot. And we can say the color, we'll just inherit, so it's the same. And then we get some nice white text, and it looks a lot better, and you can actually read it. Cool. So now we want to do our reaction picker. I said we were going to build a web component. I lied a little bit. We're actually going to build two. So this is really good value, 2 for the price of 1. And we're going to stick that in here. So we'll call this emoji picker. All right, and now we need to define our second custom element. So custom elements, define emoji picker. And once again, we need a class which extends HTML. Oh God, don't make me type it. Go HTML element. All right, we want a constructor just like we did before. We're going to call super, and then we're going to attach a shadow root. And we're nice people, so we're going to make it open again. And then we're just going to use it in HTML the same as we did before. In HTML equals. Now, in this case, what we need is a button. Selected for the plus sign at the start. That's going to turn into the emoji when we select one. So it's going to start off as a plus sign. And then we want a list of the emoji that you can pick. I don't know how to type emoji, so I'm just going to copy paste again. I changed the emoji, especially for this morning too. Cool. So if we look at that now, it looks rubbish, but it's there. Luckily, I have some more CSS prepared. With this CSS as well, obviously I'm putting it all in line here in a style element. You can also use a link tag, and then you can write your CSS not inside a string and use code completion. Okay, so it's looking a bit better now. We've got our customized emojis for this morning: sleepy face, coffee, and of course aerial tramway. But that's not quite how we want it to look. For a start, we don't want the that list to be appearing when we first open the thing. So it turns out, luckily, I've got this class here called hidden, which I can just add to this. So that's better, but the button is still white, and we wanted that to be blue, and we wanted borders and stuff. Turns out, again, I've got some colors defined here, and we need to define those, define those variables, basically. The same as we did here. What is it? Pick a color. So we can add colors into, we can add properties into our parent custom elements, and then they'll pass through to the children, just like we did with the light DOM and the dark DOM. And we'll make that the same as this. The other thing here is this pseudo class here is host. This basically refers to the shadow root of the element. So it's like the top level CSS selector. We look now, this is blue, which is nice. So now we want the list to appear when we click on the button. So this button, we want to grab a reference to that element, and we can do that just like you do in the light DOM using query selector, except we're going to do it on the shadow root. Dot selected. And then, I mean, this is just a button, so we can add an event listener, listen for a click event, and when we get a click event, we're going to, we need a reference to our list as well. Don't be like that. All right, fine, be like that. So then we can say this dot list dot class list dot toggle that hidden class. Cool. So now when we click the button, the list shows and hides. So then we just need to add some handlers to these buttons so that we can actually display the emoji. Oh, that's bugging me. Go away. So we want to do it for all of the buttons. So this dot shadow root dot query selector all. Maybe not some great selectors there, but right. So for each of those buttons, We want to add an event listener. Again, it's just a click handler. This time we need access to the event. And when you click that button, we want to grab the emoji, which is going to be the content of the button, essentially. So event.target.text content. And then we want to set the text content of our select button to that emoji. So this.button.text content equals emoji. So now when we select sleepy face or tramway, it's selecting them, but we probably also want to hide that list. Add hidden. Cool. So now that's working exactly as we wanted it to. So the only thing we've got left to do is to add these emoji to the list of previously selected emoji there. And to do that, we need a way to pass that value back up to the parent. And we can do that just using standard HTML events. So when we click this button, we're going to dispatch an event. And it needs to be a custom event because we want to pass a value through. We can call it whatever we want. Let's go with emoji picked. And we need to give it a little bit of some, what do you call it, configuration. So the first thing we need to do is give it bubbles equals true, which means that the event will be passed up to the parent. And the other thing we need to give it is detail, which is going to be the value that we want to pass in, which is the emoji. Then we can go back to our parent, and we can just listen for this event the same as we do any other. So this.shadow root, now we need to use the shadow root here because the messages won't automatically pass through the shadow barrier, right? So it needs to be the shadow root that listens. And it's just add event listener, exactly the same as anything else. And I need to stop hitting that when I mean something else. And we're listening for our emoji picker event. And if we add our handler here and say console.log event.detail, now this is the bit where it always goes wrong. So if we look at our console here and we click aerial tramway, it doesn't work. Let's not stuff around with that. Let's just look at the answer. Did I call it different things? Emoji picker, thanks. All right, this time for sure. So there you go. In the console there, you can see we've had our event pass through. That's always the bit that goes wrong. Okay, so now we need to add this basically into our HTML. So we're going to get a list to store all of the emoji in. So this.reactions.push event.detail. And then we want to write that list into the reactions element. So we need a reference to that. Shadow root select reactions. And then we can just do the same thing we've been doing all along and set some text content to be the list. And now if we look here, as we add our elements, they get added to the little list. They do get little commas in between them though, which kind of sucks because that's how JavaScript stringifies lists, but we can fix that by using join. And now that's it. We've got our web component, our social media replacement totally up and running. Two web components in 20-ish minutes. Done.
Are there any questions for Erin?
No.
No. Okay, great.
Oh,
Oh, here we go. Here we go. I'll give you that microphone for the recording.
Is that a mic? Okay, cool. I can't take this seriously, sorry. So in your eyes, is the big advantage of this the no build system?
I mean, realistically, if you're building a big app, you're going to have a build system anyway. So not really. But it is there. Like if you're doing something simple that doesn't have a build system, it's nice to be able to just do it. And it's not going to be adding any additional overhead, I guess, is the nice thing.
I couldn't help myself. I just had a quick check. Not supported in IE 11, right?
Yeah, there's polyfills available.
Yeah, okay. I guess what I'm struggling with is I really like the concept, but I feel like modern frameworks like React have sort of taken it over. So I guess my question is, where do you see this fitting into the ecosystem?
So if you're building stuff for a company that is got multiple apps, that some of them might be in React, some of them are in Angular, some of them are in Drupal, then this gives you a way to build shareable components between all of them. I see it very much as being like right down the end, the end of the tree, I guess. So the small components that are similar to what HTML gives you at the moment, but perhaps just a little bit customized. So a handy thing with this is you can just have a component that is essentially an HTML element, but with your custom styling on it. And then it makes it easy to share and use between different things. But there's also a lot of people out there building apps that don't use frameworks. Like there's a lot of people building, CMS stuff or static sites and things like that. And this would be super useful for that, I assume.
Is there another question?
Anybody else want to go on the mic?
It's a lot of fun.
It's pretty fun.
We can throw it to each other. All right, we'll break there. We'll take 2 minutes to switch over the speakers, top up your drink, grab another bite to eat. We'll be right back. Thanks.